Credit is kind of like trust. It takes a long time to build, but you can destroy it in an instant. Hey guys, Sebastian from Ask Sebi. Today we are going to look at how to rapidly increase your credit score in 2021. As always, chapters tool down below. Big favor from you guys is to give this a thumbs up because there probably will be some anti-credit people who watch this video. And if you are someone new here, want to get that extra cash back and maybe some subsidized trips, then consider subscribing. We're pretty much all about how to maximize your credit to leverage it for other things. One question I get a lot for videos like this is, why even bother? Just get a job, don't be poor, you don't have to worry about building credit. The average credit score right now in America in 2021 is 711. If you're below this, then it's obviously fine, but you might be handicapping yourself for a lot of things. If you're someone just coming out of school or you're pretty early in your career, then you might need to rent an apartment. If you are in a super competitive place for rentals, then it might make it impossible to find something that is actually good. Even worse, I've actually seen some pretty shady behavior by landlords where they try to make you pay even more money up front because you don't have a good score. I feel like finding a place is stressful enough that you don't really want to add to that. If you have the luxury of living at home, then that's great, but for a lot of people, you might need to move to a different city because that's where the opportunities are. If you have bad credit, then that can actually affect your ability to work in some industries. So for something like finance or accounting, they want to make sure that you're not at risk for either selling that information or using it in an inappropriate way. Imagine you were auditing Tesla, so you see all this financial information. Do you try to trade on that, which is insider trading? For some branches of the military, they do it as part of the enlistment process. And then for some other ones, if you are trying to go for that promotion, get that security clearance, then they also do a check. Mortgages are pretty obvious, and unless you're super rich, you probably do need to finance it. You could do something called manual underwriting, but I feel like you don't want to make that process more difficult if you don't need to. Especially for something as big as a mortgage, those little interest rates can make a huge difference, so you just want to position yourself the best you can. Okay, cool. So with all of that said, what is your credit score? It's a way to measure how reliable you are in terms of paying off your debts. There's a ton of misconceptions, but the basic idea is that they want to see that if they give you all this credit, can you be responsible? 35% of your credit score is going to be your payment history, so do you pay off what you owe? 30% is going to be the amount owed. This is your utilization. There are a ton of tricks here, and we'll cover those towards the second half of the video. 15% of your score is going to be your credit history, so how long have you had these cards? 10% is going to be new credit, which represents inquiries, so are you actively looking for cards? For example, someone applying for 1 a month would be less risky than someone applying for 10 a day. Why are you applying for so many? Is there something going on? Why am I wearing this hat? The last 10% is going to be your credit mix, and this is also one of the traps that I think people get caught in. This is basically the type of debt products that you actively use. Before we dive into all the tricks, I ended up doing a poll on the community tab, and if you are part of the 50% of people who want to fix your score, but you're maybe putting it off, you're saving it down, you're planning to do it on the weekend, and then that weekend turns into next year because New Year's resolution time, might as well fix my score then versus now. If you are someone who's stuck, I ended up making a community on Vibely. As a disclaimer, there's no secret sauce in there or silver bullets. A lot of people have been able to get pretty good scores just by watching these videos. The main point of it though is accountability, and number 2, to help you build out a spreadsheet to manage everything and to improve your score in a very short amount of time. It's really easy to talk about all the principles, but making them bite-sized pieces and actionable ones should help a lot of people. Ironically, this spreadsheet is also how I manage 30 plus cards, so if there is a secret sauce, then it's a secret sauce to that. It is $8 a month, but it's intended to be a 1-month bootcamp. $8 also keeps the bots out of the system who are offering free crypto. There's also some psychology around if you pay for something, you're more incentivized to actually go through it compared to free information. Some people are probably going to be surprised that I'm charging only $8 and not $80 or $800, and I probably could get away with $800, but that's not really the point. End of the day, I want something that the average person can afford and is about the price of 2 coffees or one in San Francisco where I live. Again, Vibely link down below if you want to check it out. If you already have great credit and you have a system for everything, then you're good to go. Don't worry about that. If you do want to learn about cards though, then consider using the ones on our site, asksebi.com, and also the ones down below in the description box. Probably the easiest way to support the channel, so thank you guys in advance. Diving back into it, why do I think credit mix is a trap? It's a trap! Number 1, it forces you to get debt products that you might not actively need. So for example, I live somewhere where I don't need to have a car. I can pretty much walk everywhere or take public transit, but for a lot of other people, they have cars. For me, it doesn't really make sense to get an auto loan just to increase my score because that's pretty stupid. A lot of other instruments like student loans, mortgages, and auto loans have an expiration date. Once you finish paying it off, then it's effectively closed, and it does keep aging for a little bit, but it eventually falls off. So you're saying if I pay off my student loans, then it hurts my credit, but if I keep it and I keep paying interest, then it helps. This is ironically why credit cards are so powerful and why we focus on them so much. They're one of the few products where you can get away not paying any interest and it still helps your credit score long term. The cool thing is that you don't need to spend a ton on them. Let's do a deep dive on the other factors other than credit mix. So I actually made a chart for this 2 or 3 years ago, and I noticed that some blogs and also some other YouTubers have decided to copy it and just replace my logo with something else. Ironic because I have the keynote file for it. I ended up doing something a little bit different. Okay, let's start off inquiries, and this is the thing that most people get antsy about. Inquiries do not matter as much as you think they do. In the early game, maybe it does hit you for 10, 20, 30 points because you're still new to everything, but once you have that base up, it's only going to hurt maybe 1 to 5 points, so it's a lot better later on. If that sounds super confusing, the easiest parallel is working out. So when you're working out, technically, you're destroying your fibers and then your body is coming back and repairing them or replacing them in order to build additional muscle. So working out is taking 2 steps back and then 5 steps forward because you're damaging it in the short term, but long term it's making it better. Inquiries are part of the game, and Michael Scott has a pretty good quote on this. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. The cool thing too is that after 1 year, the inquiry stops affecting your score, and after 2 years, it actually drops off completely. There was probably a period where I had 20 or 25 inquiries, some crazy amount, and they're gone. They don't really show up anymore. So inquiries, low impact, and another low impact one is going to be total accounts. The idea being that the more that you can manage, the better it is. So for example, imagine a manager who can manage a team of 20 people, and then you compare it to one who can only manage a team of 4 people. Obviously, a lot more goes into it, especially if you're someone like Michael Scott, but for a lot of people, you would say that the person who can manage 20 on average is probably a little bit better. I would recommend thinking strategically about this and adding the right cards rather than just racing to the end and trying to add as many as possible. If you are someone who wants to maximize your subsidized trips or that cash back, then I'd recommend watching our 524 video just to make sure that you're not getting locked out of any systems. Basically, each non-chase card you add can easily cost you something like $500 in subsidized travel. Moving into the medium impact zone, we have average age of accounts. Online, you'll probably see this as AAOA in case that looks weird to you. Age of account is how long you've had that card or that product, and the average age is the average among the cards. There are some systems that focus on only your oldest card, so that's something to be aware of. You generally want to keep your oldest card for that reason. This is why I recommend downgrading instead of canceling some of those cards that you have that option for. So for something like the Chase Sapphire Preferred, maybe you're getting that bonus and then cashing it out. Year 2, it doesn't make sense. Just downgrade it into a no annual fee Freedom Flex. That keeps the account's age, it doesn't cancel it, it doesn't do anything, and then it just keeps aging. It doesn't hurt you long term because there's no annual fee. Kind of related, but if you have a closed account, it actually does stay on your credit report for up to 10 years if it's good history and up to 7 years if it's bad history. It does keep aging with you, but at that 10-year point, it does drop off, so you would want to have some other cards with you rather than nothing at that point. Moving into the high impact zone, we have derogatory marks. These are negative items on your credit report, also known as baddies, but in the bad way. So think missed payments, collections, foreclosures, them collecting your car back. Completely forgot the word for that, but it's repossessions. These are generally items that can tank your score in the long term, so you'd want to watch out for them and try to avoid them if possible. Payment history is another high impact zone, and this is effectively total number of on-time payments divided by number of total payments you should have made. So for example, if I have a card for 12 months and I made 11 of those payments on time out of the 12 payments, then I'm at 11 divided by 12. Looking at the chart, you can tell that 100% is the best, and it does get progressively worse pretty quickly. Early on, this is one of the easiest things to mess up because you don't have enough on-time payments that one missed payment does dramatically pull that down. If you're someone currently at 100%, then auto-pay is your friend. If you're someone currently in a bad spot because life does happen, then I'd recommend paying at least a minimum amount. That way there's an on-time payment. If you do have to keep that balance for, let's say, another month, you end up paying interest on that, so not ideal, but at least you don't have any negatives on your credit report. There are some tricks involved where you can kind of artificially increase your total payments. So for example, let's say you have 4 cards, but you only actively use one of them. For the other 3 cards, you can put very small transactions on them, let's say $1, $2. That way there is a payment that's due at that statement date and you're paying it off in full. If you only have one on-time payment every month, then it's going to take a lot longer than having a bunch of them. My 2 suggestions for this are going to be Amazon reloads because you can do them for 50 cents and then also self-checkout, but only if there's no one else behind you. This also ties into a utilization trick that we'll cover in a second. Utilization is a pretty high impact factor, and it's how much of the credit that has been extended to you that you actively use. For a lot of other things like student loans, that doesn't really matter that much. Most of this is going to be impacted by credit cards. The rationale is that mortgages, student loans, auto loans, they know that that's a long-term thing that you're going to pay off over time rather than something that's supposed to be paid off in full. But you need to carry a balance and then pay interest in order for your credit to increase. The credit industry wants you to have higher balances because that benefits them. Ironically, not really the case. It actually benefits you to have a lower utilization. There's two types of utilizations. One is across your whole portfolio of cards. The other one is going to be on a per card basis. The first one is generally a red flag for bust out. So if you are someone who is likely to max out your cards, run away, do something else, and just not pay them back. This is often when issuers will either shut your cards down, ask you for tax returns to make sure that you're good for it, get some income verifications, or sometimes just cut your card off for now and maybe not even let you charge it until you pay that balance down. That can also happen on a per card basis or on a per issuer basis because they might have too much exposure to you. But a lot of people who are trying to increase their score, the per card basis is what kind of screws them over. The tough thing is that you might have a card that has a lower limit and you want to use it because maybe it earns more points. There is a trick here though. When you think of utilization on a per card basis, it's basically a snapshot on a specific date when that statement closes. Let's actually do a real life example because I think that makes it a lot simpler for people. I have a card that is from August 17th until September 16th. So we know that on September 16th at midnight Eastern time, they're going to be taking that picture. You do want to do payments before that because for a lot of them, there is something like a 4 p.m. cutoff and it does differ by card issuer. There's a $5,000 credit limit, but I ended up using $4,682 for some reimbursable work spend. Doing the math, that's 93%, and if we look at the chart, that's terrible. If this ends up posting to the credit report when they take that picture, it's going to tank my score. Even though I have $200,000 in credit limits across other cards, and if you look at this number, it only represents about 2%, it still looks bad on a per card basis. So knowing when picture day is, I ended up cleaning myself up, so I ended up paying $4,680 right beforehand. This means that my utilization is $250 divided by $5,000, effectively 1%, even though it's more like 0.05. So by doing this prepayment, treating it as a pay-as-you-go card, you can protect your credit history during busy times where you might have more expenses, such as the holidays or back to school. As long as I pay off the $2.50 before October 10th, I don't pay any interest, and I also have another on-time payment for my credit history. One obvious question is why not just pay off the whole balance in full before picture day rather than leaving a small amount? If you have a lot of cards, if you have a pretty long history, then I would argue that it doesn't matter too much, but I did this mostly for this exercise. ABCD2199 from FICO Forum has a pretty good chart here, and if you look at it, you can see that there's a dip at 0%, and then there's a peak towards 1, 2, 3, and 4%. Basically 0% is fine, but 1% would technically be better. And it doesn't really even need to be that much money. It could be $2. If you are someone paying off all the cards before picture day, then make sure that you have at least one card that has a payment that's due, and it can be a tiny amount. The reason for this is because you want at least one on-time payment every month. I've seen some people's credit score drop because of this, because they had no activity. If all of this sounds very confusing, then I'd recommend checking out that Vibely course, just because I think it is a lot easier to learn over a period of time, kind of like studying, versus trying to cram everything in right before the exam. Whether you want to have 2 or 3 cards or 40 cards, I think having that foundation is pretty key. For the OGs who've been watching this as a refresher video, if you are someone that wants to learn about other cards, whether cashback, travel, anything else, and you want to support the channel, links down below and also on our website, asksebi.com. Make sure that the offer is competitive, but otherwise, huge way to support the channel. My question for you guys is, what's your credit score and what's holding it back? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and if you know anyone else who would benefit from this because it is pretty helpful, I think, then feel free to share this with them because it'll probably help them out. Otherwise, hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time.